Welcome to Talk to Brazil with Tom Reaoch, the business connector to business in Brazil. Talk to Brazil is a leading business podcast and talks with business experts throughout the world. I'm Tom Reaoch, an American known as the King of Networking, connecting people from my studio in Brazil. Today's guest is Sirisha Kuchimanchi, and she's joining us from Dallas, Texas. Sirisha Kuchimanchi is founder of Sahita, a global community for South Asian women to achieve career and financial empowerment. Sirisha is also an entrepreneur, keynote speaker, and podcast host of Women, Career, and Life. So Sirisha, what is Sahita and why did you create it?
So Sahita is, Tom, thank you for having me on your podcast. It's lovely to be connected through common connections, and I'm looking forward to today's chat. So Sahita is a global community for South Asian women, just like you described it. So the way I envision it is basically connecting South Asian women from across the globe, from different parts of the world, to find, it's basically a community for a couple of things, for us to have sort of open, honest conversations, to find women who are similarly minded, who are walking the same journey path as you often. And also the intersection of career and finance, because I find that oftentimes when we are working, not everyone gets to manage their money, either for lack of time or knowledge, or sometimes maybe even there a little bit of fear. And so I feel often that career and finance are separated in many people's lives. And financial empowerment for me is a pillar that I kind of stick to. I think it's very critical no matter what age you are to understand money. I learned it as an adult growing up. I continue to learn, have made a lot of mistakes along the way. And I actually quit my corporate job a few months ago. And I tell people I could not have made the decision if I didn't have some idea of how my money picture looked.
Right. Now, money is sustainability. So
exactly.
When we talk about financial awareness and we talk about sustainability, we need, as a person, to sustain ourselves.
Exactly. It gives you opportunities. It gives you choices. It gives you the opportunity to make intentional decisions, right? Otherwise, we kind of tend to go with the flow because that's what we understand. So there's this story. One of my friends, I have this conversation with a few people over the years, and over time, some of them are entrepreneurs and they might run businesses, but they don't manage their own finances. And it's forced them to look at their money. Like I have a really good friend that I kept talking about money for a long time. And one day after lunch, our conversation said, go run your numbers because, in a few years she'll think about retirement. So I was like, okay, go run your numbers and let me know what it is. So we decided to check back in an hour. So she went and ran her numbers. And what was surprising is she only needed 25% of what she thought she needed for retirement. That's a huge differential. To know that you need 1x versus 4x is like eye-opening because there's a lot of emotion, a lot of, I would say fear also, because even I had it. I mean, the reason I started to do my numbers, so kind of start to learn some finances was because, can I retire? What does it look like? Do I have enough money? I think there's a lot of those conversations that run in our head often.
Right.
So it's like, how do you understand it? And you have to have some basic understanding. It's just math that everyone does. It's not actually as complicated as we tend to think. I mean, think about it. All women around the world, no matter how educated you are, run households, or, whether you are married or single or whichever stage you are, you manage a lot of things independently. So it's just the same thing that goes on an Excel sheet or on the internet for you to manage a little more. So it's not that complicated. So it's sort of destigmatizing this conversation around money. And the reason I tied to career is because a lot of people I talk to who have, very empowered careers, who are like really doing excellently at what they're doing and might be managing portfolios for the same reasons I mentioned, to not always manage their money. But, when you think about it, if I'm in a career pathway, I should learn to negotiate. I should learn to ask for equal pay. There are all these other conversations that are tied to money. So to me, they're very intricately tied. We tend to often have them as separate conversations. But I think we should be having them as a holistic piece because they are tied together.
Well, the career actually starts, and for most people, it's typical. I have to say that for myself. You finish school, you either find a job or a job finds you, and you're happy to start receiving money, which was something that previously you might not have had as a flow of income that would, let's say it's guaranteed, but it seemed to be practical and guaranteed. And you worry about the job. You worried about what you're doing for whoever's giving you that money. And actually what they're doing is just paying you for the service that you rendered. But in that, and I probably sinned along that line, dedicated most of my time and energy towards the company, towards what I was doing. And obviously I was paid. I have no complaints of what I received. But the managing part of that, it was secondary. Because it was a cash, money was coming in and you managed what was going out. But to that point of how much is enough comes to the point of how long do you think you're going to need it? And when I was young, the perspective for life was 65. When I was 20, you look out and say, well, work until you're 60, you retire, you'll get some benefits, they'll give you a watch, then you can fish for 5 years and it's done. That's not the way the world is anymore. We're living longer because we want to. We're taking care of our bodies and our mind because we want to, and that takes money. So we're actually extending the time that we need the money for. And many times that's not part of that equation of how much is enough.
Yes, that's true. So exactly. And so part of the conversation inside Sahita is around money. But the other part of it is that open, honest conversations that I was talking about. So from my own experience in corporate life and having conversations with many other women, when you're trying to grow your career or even thinking about pivoting, I think this is every corporate structure. It was not just mine. Mine was also incredibly supportive. I had a lot of supportive people around me. But it's the structures that are created. You can't always talk about everything you want, whether you want to advance in your career inside the organization or outside, right? So I feel like we need the space to have these conversations. Like, who do I go to? Who can I have this conversation? And the other part about it was I wanted an ecosystem of, so I have friends who are also incredibly supportive, but they're not necessarily walking that same path. So, I can brainstorm a little bit, but I would let me use the word, and it doesn't exclude people, but say similarly smart, ambitious women who are walking a certain path that I am trying to walk. They may not be in my sector. They may not be in my part of the world. They may not even be doing anything or understand what I'm doing, but they have similar challenges and we can exchange ideas, and that's where the diversity of thought comes in. So we have different perspectives and that might open some ideas for me. So like I do podcasting, as you mentioned. And one of the things in podcasting when I did it for the first year was I didn't really know very many people in the podcasting community. And then I went to this podcasting conference and started to build a community around me. And so many ideas, right? So many people who mentor either a few minutes here or something else there, or just these conversations spark so much knowledge growth and ways to pursue different things. And that's why it is there. So I do this networking lunch locally. And actually, I plan to do it wherever I travel. So
that's face-to-face.
This is
face-to-face.
Exactly. So I started this a few months ago. I'm doing my second one, and I plan to do this every month. Is I just put out a note on LinkedIn and just tell people, and I might tag a few folks and say, come to lunch, anyone can show up. And I move it around the city so that I just drive around so that different people, it's usually during a weekday at lunchtime. So it makes it easy for them to show up. And when I have the first one and I talk to these people after this, even though we network and stuff, especially post-COVID, the face-to-face connection was so engaging, so important. And nobody really worked in the same area or in the same sector even. It's just that they like that conversation. And that's kind of what they want to see out of Sahita even, sometimes some face-to-face. So eventually I would like to make it into like locally where people can meet and work together, or they're in the same sector. So there's a community aspect to it. Then there is going to be, sort of these micro learning is what I think of it, career, financial micro learning, which very similar to my podcast started because I felt as I was growing the career ladder that we didn't have, you're learning how to do it. And many often we don't know whom to ask the questions, what kind of questions. and moving ahead in that pathway as well.
Yeah, because each person's at a different point in whatever journey they choose or even planning to choose.
Yeah.
So I see from your sites, are you planning to rejoin the workforce? Are you having a hard time planning financial? Are you feeling stuck in life? I think that's probably what many people feel.
Yes.
Facing difficulties on how to balance your work life and personal life. That's a challenge for everybody, anywhere. Because
Yes.
that's the toughie, because your corporate life, your business life, even if it's your own company, sometimes it's even worse if it's your own company. It's 24/7 because you think you need to do that, and maybe you do, but you also have to have a life involved in that.
Yes.
Some people may have family or hobbies or whatever, and sitting down and enjoying people. I think it's become highly valued after the COVID. I found that because during the COVID, even here in Brazil, the networking events stopped, everything stopped. And more recently, business associations that I'm part of have just restarted. And it's amazing of the energy now post-COVID compared to pre-COVID. Because pre-COVID, that was sort of the way of life. You go into a networking situation face-to-face, and it was sort of normal, right? If there can call anything normal. Today, it's so highly energized. So you can see that pent-up energy, the pent-up requirement of seeing people. It's the touchy feeling that I say. So that interaction, the body language, everything else, seeing, looking around the room, that's essential. Because virtual networking, and I think we're both pros at that, I'm not saying that's bad, it's good. Because we can reach the world and the world can reach us. But whenever you can sit down face to face, it's sort of a more liberating environment and opportunity.
Exactly. And my plan is to do this even when I travel, if I have enough time in certain places to do local events, no matter whether it's nationally or internationally. And when you think about what you're talking about, that sparking and stuff, oftentimes, right, when you're working, whatever structure you may work in, corporate, your own business, you are so busy. And when you talk about it, that you don't have time to build a network sometimes outside. I remember when I started working, like I was a stay-at-home mom for 3 years. And I tell people the best part of it is I got to make friends. Not that I don't have friends at work. It's a different type of friendship outside.
Right.
And I felt like when I was at work, I didn't have the bandwidth to do this, sort of invest the time. So in some ways, these face-to-face networking are for people to step out of your workplace and meet other, in my case, women, to network and get to know each other. Actually, I've been asked by women and men to see if I can have a networking lunch for both men and women. So that's something I might start in the future and call it, I was thinking of maybe like ally lunch. You have both people, because we end up working together anyway. It doesn't have to be just a women, but I will still keep doing the women's lunch. It's called Ladies Let's Do Lunch. And it's about just meeting women who you don't know, or you may know, bring anyone you want. So if anyone in your audience sees me posting, they could do that locally themselves. Right. Or when I travel, get to meet them as well.
Well, you used a word there that I think is essential. And I consider myself a networker, but I consider my connections as allies. What are you looking for? What do most people look for when you say networking? They're either looking for a job or they're looking for a client. And I'm saying that's wrong. That's the way it is, and that's part of networking. But there are other parts of networking, and the one that I firmly believe is allies. If you find and create allies, and that ally knows what you do, how you do, and what you expect, they help you put that out there. They may not be your client. They may not give you a job forever, but that's okay. Because most people aren't. I'm not going to get a job from 12,000 people that I know. I'm not looking for a job from 12,000 people that I might know. But I do want 12,000 people to know what I do. And I would like to know what those 12,000 people do. Because we're together talking because we both mutually know a person who's just very quickly, a click away. So an ally can be one click away today. So if you remember somebody, and you can only remember that person if you've grasped something about the person. what it is, what they
Very
do,
true.
what they are, what they stand for, what their new challenge is, and that's it. And that is I think that's the essence of sitting down and talking, where most people, well, I don't going to go there because I won't find clients. Well, that could be true, but I think it's a lie, because you can find allies, certainly in any event.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the point, right? Networking sometimes often we think of as very transactional or very
Right.
opportunistic, but those are misconceptions. And people I've also realized, because I've done these talks at my university and on LinkedIn, oftentimes people think of networking as only within the people they already know. It's about actually expanding it to the people you don't know. That's the most important thing. And I have so much fun reaching out to people, but not everyone responds, and that's perfectly fine. Sometimes I've sent messages and said, "Oh, that didn't go so great," but it is about being able to find a common connection with them. Like
Right.
maybe it's the work I'm doing on Sahita, or maybe it's on the podcast, or maybe my tech background that I worked on, or none of that. I just like something they wrote about, and it sort of resonates with me. Or it could be some other idea, or sometimes on LinkedIn I'm connecting two people who have never met each other, saying, you guys should connect, you're working in the same field, I think it would be great for you to connect. So lots of ways that you can mingle, and in the end all of us live to build a sense of community, right? That's why we work, and that's why we do everything we do. And the word used to be work-life balance, work-life harmony. I kind of think of it as work-life choices now, that I've started to think more about. So as we're thinking about work-life choices, even inside Sahita, one of the things will be like these cohorts. So for those who you say may be stuck or trying to figure out what to do next, they will come together as peers trying to unravel this mystery,
Right.
and say, okay, what do I do next? It's like that bouncing of ideas, because we only know so much and we need other people's input. I mean, we've been talking about social media, and you've given me some insight today that I hadn't really thought about. So it's different perspectives that you'll take a little piece here, a little piece there, and see which you'll use now and
true.
something tomorrow.
And the world's made of 8 billion pieces. That's 8 billion
Mhm.
people. And I recently had a meeting with a person who's a marketing agency, social media marketing agency. And we were discussing exactly the COVID and the pandemic. And he said what his company suffered. All companies know people who had a challenge. But he said what he felt it really suffered was creativity. He says when everybody, as we are, if you're in your own location, if you're not out, creativity does suffer. Creativity grows as if you sit around the table, men or women, or in a different ambient, a different place in the city. If you just get out of where you are, creativity naturally will happen. It could happen because you open your eyes up to something that maybe you haven't seen, or answer a question, or have a question that you hadn't thought about. And that stimulus comes from other people.
Yes, and networking, we are talking about face to face, but also try and do it virtually. I network more than, I'd say, 70% of the time virtually, because I'm talking to people from all over
Right.
the US, all over the globe, that I make these connections in different places, or I meet them through podcasting or wherever, whatever medium, maybe through tech. I'm doing them depending on what the sync up is. I'm going to have a quick 15-minute call with them. Sometimes we may follow up and have a longer relationship doing something else, or maybe come back a few years later. So I would tell it's not about just engaging to get something out of it. It's, like you said, it's to get allies, but it's a sense of community. I actually love the fact that when I travel, I have different people I reach out to. So I traveled recently for a conference to do a keynote speech, and I looked up the people in that city because, as I continue to expand my network there, I saw two people in my network, and I actually reached out to them. They have never met them.
Right.
I've actually haven't even spoken to one of them, and said, hey, I'm coming to your city. Can we meet? So we actually met for coffee. And we had a great conversation for an hour and a half. And, that's what I've started to do. And even
Priceless.
otherwise,
Priceless.
Totally. And I do it. I meet old friends, and that's the way to keep connected. We need that sense of community. So I'd say reach out to people. I almost travel to every city, and it's rare that I don't meet somebody that I know or I don't know.
Well, I like them both because what I say is I can only increase my network through people I don't know. It's mathematical. So I go out to meet people that I don't know. I also go to see people that I do know because that reinforces my network. That's the credibility. That's the click away like Alex sent us, just the click. So he doesn't really have to get engaged. If he sends me a click, you need to meet this woman, bingo, that's it. He doesn't have to call me and tell me or whatever, that's it. But being in either virtual, and virtual, it's more challenging. We have been, during the pandemic, part of virtual meetings, seminars, whatever. I try to connect with people real time while I'm in a webinar. I try to find those people. Say, who are they? Then I'll find them on LinkedIn. I say, hey, we just shared a breakout chat room. Tell me more about yourself. And that's how it can work. Because really in virtual situations, time, even in face-to-face, in a normal face-to-face networking situation here in Brazil, you have 30 minutes before a seminar or a session. And that 30 minutes is 30 minutes. So you can either have coffee and eat a piece of cake, or you can meet people, find people you don't know. And that's where I've started and helped train people. So it's not going in to find people you already know. You already know them. Wave, say hello, but pass on to somebody that you don't know. And that's what you do, and that's what should be done, and that's what your followers need to learn, is to you create and increase your network through people that you don't know, period.
Yeah. They say, right, your network is your net worth, and in some ways that is true.
That's back to your financial concerns that you said at the beginning,
Yeah, it's a nice segue to wrap around. And like I've done these talks, everywhere I go, I pull up my LinkedIn. I'll ask people if they're on LinkedIn, and I pull up my QR code. And for those of you who are looking, there are ways to search it up and connect with every single person. And when I have these webinars or I meet other people on webinars, I put my LinkedIn profile in there because obviously we are already there for a common reason.
Right.
It's a common problem we're trying to solve or a common community we are part of. So I put it in there and I get a couple of connections that way. Not everyone clicks on it. It's interesting. There can be like 50, 60 people on it, but only I'll get maybe 10% people join.
Which is good. I found, statistically, even when I was a speaker going out and talking, you may be able to reach 5% of people. Everybody agrees and everybody will clap and say, yeah, well, that's it. They agree with you. But maybe 5% will act. And that's really the 5% I look for, and I'm sure it's the 5% you look for. Because it's still 5%. It's 5% of a possible 8 billion person target. And it's just step by step. So it's not why I met 100 people. No. And it's a challenge for me to interact with 100 people after an event. It's less of a challenge and probably more meaningful with 5 or 10.
Yeah.
So to our listeners, the 8 billion are out there. I'm not sure they're all listening. How can they find you?
So the easiest way to find me is if you search for Sirisha Kuchimanchi. I'm on LinkedIn. And I also have a website. And the reason I'm directing you to these two places is there's so much going on. So these are the two best places to reach me because they interconnect to each other. Then you can connect to my podcast, to my keynote speaking if you want to invite me to talk at any of your events. They can, look at Sahita. Though it's a community for South Asian women and the content is curated, it's inclusive. So anyone can join if the topics resonate with them, and check out the website. And, I do a local radio show, so they can tune in and listen. So Sirisha Kuchimanchi, you can look it up, .com, and check it out on LinkedIn and elsewhere.
Very good. Well, thanks for sharing your time and your energy, and success.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for having me. And like you said, we were just a click away and we needed, Alex to connect us. So
very good. And for our listeners, again, you can find more about it at Sirisha, Sirisha, and the last name, Kuchimanchi, is Kuchimanchi. You find her on LinkedIn and the site Sahita.live. That's Sahita.live. Thanks to our listeners and our sponsor, Focus MI Market Intelligence. Focus MI specializes in market research for the Brazilian agricultural market. More about them at their site, focusmi.com. Remember, when you talk to Tom, you talk to the world. Goodbye, and thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to Tom Reaoch on Talk to Brazil, the business connector to Brazil.